Legacy Precious Metals is the company that I trust to give you good and patient counsel for investing in your retirement. The Biden administration has caused a financial crisis, and they have no clue how to fix it. Oil prices have skyrocketed, and when oil prices go up, not only do your expenses go up, but the cost of transportation and shipping spikes, leading the prices of goods to rise. And we are already seeing record inflation. That's the last thing that we need. Our economy is in trouble, and you need to take steps to protect yourself. If all your money is tied up in stocks, bonds, and traditional markets, you may be vulnerable. So gold is one of the very best ways to protect your retirement. No matter what happens, you own your own gold. It's real, it's physical, and it's always been valuable since the dawn of time. Call Legacy Precious Metals today at 866-528-1903 or visit them online at legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com, where you can download the free investor's guide. You can also go to my Facebook page, Jenna Ellis. I am a public figure on Facebook, and I just posted yesterday a really great interview with the president of Legacy Precious Metals, who is discussing why you need to start your retirement account even if you're in your 20s or 30s. There is always a great time to protect your retirement and invest, just like you want to protect your health over the long term. So go to Legacy Precious Metals at legacypminvestments.com or call 866-528-1903. All right, well, 2022 is going to be a critical year for America. AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens, along with their nearly 2 million members. The fight to stop out-of-control spending in the president's Build Back Better scheme is far from over, and Congress is plotting more legislation that could hurt our seniors. The midterm elections will be a battle for freedom versus socialism. Unlike liberal groups, AMAC is America's conservative, action-oriented 50-plus organization fighting hard every day here in Washington and across the nation for our seniors. So I'm urging you to choose AMAC now. You will receive all of the great membership benefits, including AMAC discounts on hotels, travels, and restaurants, and your membership will support your conservative values. So go to amac.us/Ellis. That's amac.us/ELLIS to become an AMAC member now.
As a constitutional law attorney, former senior legal advisor, and personal counsel to President Donald J. Trump, Jenna Ellis believes in the rule of law and the importance of integrity in our elections. And she's ready to tackle the big cultural and legal issues facing America. This is the Jenna Ellis Show. Here is your host, Jenna Ellis.
Happy Tuesday, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Jenna Ellis Show. I'm Jenna Ellis, and today is absolutely unprecedented. I'm sure by now you have all heard the news about the internal draft of the opinion in the Dobbs abortion-related case that was leaked late last night to Politico as an exclusive, and they chose to print the actual first draft opinion in full. This is unprecedented because while there have been other signals from various individuals who have claimed that they know how the court is going to rule on one side or another in a particular case, or for example, in the Obergefell versus Hodges opinion, the same-sex marriage case in 2015, there was an individual who was apparently, at least allegedly according to him, invited to be a participant in watching that opinion and hearing that opinion be handed down. And he signaled on his own social media that it was a really exciting day and that the next day he was going to be there as a guest. And for the people that saw that, that was completely unprecedented and a breach of the court's typical protocols. But for this type of first draft, months ahead of when we anticipated this opinion being handed down, that is something that has never happened before in the history of the United States Supreme Court, and has a lot of people on both sides very upset. So I want to give you a couple of takeaway points here. So there are really two main issues that we need to talk about. First, the implications of the leak itself and why that is important. And second, if this first draft does in fact ultimately signal the opinion of the Supreme Court as it will be handed down when it's in its final format, what effect does this have? So those are the first two issues. So for the first issue of what does this leak signal, why did this happen? It's my opinion that this leak was not just intended to put pressure on members of the Supreme Court to change their opinion. We saw that in Washington, D.C. last night. Barricades were put up in front of the Supreme Court, expecting riots. And, as Benny Johnson, my good friend, tweeted and said, if this were against the Dobbs the Dobbs holding and Roe versus Wade was going to continue to be the law of the land, then we wouldn't see the barricades up at the Supreme Court at all. It's only when the leftists and the Democrats don't get their way. And that's absolutely true. So when we look at this, I think that there was some intention to create pressure on the Supreme Court. And in fact, Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts just earlier today issued a statement in this court, and rarely do the justices have to issue statements outside of their actual opinions. They are not a political branch. They're intended to not be a political branch. So it was really frustrating, I'm sure, for him that he even had to do this. But in part, this is what he said. Justices circulate draft opinions internally as a routine and essential part of the court's confidential, deliberative work. Although the document described in yesterday's report is authentic, it does not represent a decision by the court or the final position of any member on the issues in this case. So that's important because it does signal that this is a draft, but it also does authenticate the draft. So this is the current posture of where this court's opinion may ultimately rest when the full and final opinion is handed down. So it looks like Alito, as of course an associate justice, has been assigned to write for the majority, which is currently that 5-4. So what is the other possibility here, though, beyond putting pressure on the members, or at least one of them? We've seen Kavanaugh trending, and of course this was in 2018 when he was the nominee to the Supreme Court. We had all of the leftists and all of the feminists that were out that were objecting in some parts really radically and I think demonically objecting to his confirmation, and it was all over the abortion issue. And so now he is, of course, specifically being targeted because this is the leftist worst fear. They have to worship the issue of abortion because they want to have absolutely zero social or legal consequences for not only all sexual issues, but they also want to, of course, take that outside of the context of the traditional family. So of course, we can talk about that whole philosophy, and I did an entire podcast on the substance of the Dobbs arguments and why that's so important. So go back and listen to that because I don't want to get back into all of that and just be repetitive here. Listen to that podcast. Listen to the one that I did back in February after the oral arguments were actually held. Did a special episode because that was a Friday. So listen to all of those if you missed those or you just want a refresher. But the other really, really damaging issue here, and one of the things that I think is actually the bigger problems of this leak, is that this is intentionally trying to create pressure on Congress to effectively moot out the opinion before it's even handed down. Because imagine if this were the opinion and it was handed down like every other Supreme Court opinion, and we all would have the same reaction. Conservatives would be saying, yes, this is the correct opinion. Roe versus Wade was improperly held at the inception in 1973, and then, of course, its progeny. We all agree with that. We anticipated this. The left would do their berserk sort of reaction, and we would have this same on the merits reaction. So why, when we're getting this draft ahead of time, and this is probably 6 weeks or even 2 months in advance of the full opinion, what can happen in between then? Well, that can give Congress the opportunity for the Democrats to create very intense pressure on Joe Manchin, on Susan Collins, on Lisa Murkowski, on some of these others in the Senate to get to the 60 votes that would be needed for Congress to essentially statutorily codify or make a law that is surrounding the abortion issue and try to, from Congress, have a federal law that says that women have a so-called right to abortion. And that's what you're seeing even with Bernie Sanders, Ilhan Omar, AOC, all of these leftists, even Joe Biden in his statement today that is talking about the importance of keeping Roe versus Wade as the quote-unquote law of the land. Well, this is going to, for the next few weeks, create intense pressure on Congress. And the Democrats are doing that not only before the opinion is actually handed down, but also before the midterms. They want to push this through. And that's absolutely transparent in the leftist reaction and their response to this leak. They're not concerned about the protocols. They're not concerned about the damage that this is doing, the intentional targeting of justices. All they care about is getting their way. Isn't it so ironic that the Democrats have been screaming, especially in the context of January 6th and all of the theatrics and the political theater around that narrative that the leftists and the committee are pushing. They are saying the rule of law, the Constitution, and then as soon as it doesn't benefit them to actually uphold the Constitution, they throw it out the window. They throw out the procedures. They have all of these unethical breaches. They do anything that they want to do in order to get their way. So the latest thing that they're now doing is that because this very first draft was leaked, they are giving themselves enough time that if Congress chose to actually pass legislation that would codify a woman's so-called right to an abortion, then that would have to be dealt with and effectively moot out the Dobbs decision and say, well, it doesn't apply because now Congress is taking care of it. There are also a couple of problems with that, though. The chief among them is that we all know, and what you learn from this show is actual text of the Constitution and why this isn't just a political question, it's a power question. It is a limited separation of powers question. There is no power that is given to Congress to have a law that allows for abortion. It is textually not there. And so when Congress is looking at its subject matter and what it can legislate on for the entire country, they have to look at the text of Article 1, Section 8. There is nothing whatsoever about abortion or even in the leftist wild perverse view that abortion constitutes healthcare, and we all know why that's not true, because abortion is a medical intervention that is intentionally designed to cause the death of a child. It's not healthcare by any means. But even if we said, okay, for argument's sake, if that's your premise, you're trying to jury rig this and to try to, wiggle this into the text of the Constitution, healthcare as an entire subject matter is not given to Congress in Article 1, Section 8. There is no way that they can maneuver this to make this remotely plausible that it is a federal legislative power that Congress has. So remember, government does not have rights. Government has specific, limited being the key word here, powers, and Congress is limited and confined to the text of the United States Constitution. Now, do the Democrats care about that? No. This is all political for them, and they are going to create and mount a pressure campaign that they already started as late as last night by saying, now we need to do something about it. Do something was even trending on Twitter to say that all of the leftists and all of the feminists and all of these people who can't even define what a woman is now all of a sudden up in arms, literally, for women's rights. And I would like to know, can you even define a woman? Why do we need women's rights when you don't even know what a woman is? And apparently, there's also a tweet that I thought was hilarious. Like, this is such bigotry that we're saying that women should have a right to choose when we're ignoring all of the men that can get pregnant out there. What is this, right? But this just shows you how the left does not care and will not even be consistent when they're with their own narrative when it serves their end goals and their political purposes. They don't care about the rule of law. They don't care about the U.S. Constitution. They certainly don't care about the integrity of life and about the science, because otherwise they would confine themselves to how our American system of government works and recognize that this is not a federal legislative power or a federal legislative question, that the court is right if they end up holding this way, that this absolutely belongs to the states, and that states, by their representatives in their state legislatures, can then create the law for the states, and they can limit abortion if they so choose. And so the left does not want this to be a debate among the 50 states. They want to purposefully control this issue, and they want to allow even state-funded abortion access on demand for all 50 states. That's their end goal. They don't care how they get there. So for this leak, the importance of this is not only to signal to the court, we really don't care about your protocols. We really don't care that you're not a political branch. We don't respect your power and authority under Article 3 of the Constitution. We just want to win the end game. And we will ignore all of the principles, all of the rule of law. We will ignore the text of the Constitution, anything that we have to do to get there. So I believe that this leak was intentionally designed as a first draft to show this is how the Supreme Court is going to hold in 6 weeks, 2 months. And so Congress, we are now going to pressure you to try to codify Roe versus Wade and make this a so-called women's right to an abortion. So let's play that out. What if they are ultimately successful? And either, and of course, this will pass in the House because there's a Democrat majority right now. That would pass in the House, likely no problem. The issue becomes the Senate. If they can't get to 60 votes, then there are even senators now, including Bernie Sanders, that are calling for destroying and dismantling the filibuster so that it is just the nuclear option. The 50 votes plus, of course, Kamala Harris would be the tiebreaker, and we know how her vote would go. So they're calling to push this through by any means possible. If they are successful in that, they're successful in destroying the filibuster or getting 60 votes, or they are successful in that nuclear option, what happens? Well, then you have Congress with this unconstitutional legislation that will then have to be challenged, and that would go up to the Supreme Court likely, because there are a lot of organizations on the conservative side that of course would challenge that. That would then have to go up to the Supreme Court, go through the whole process, and that will likely take quite a while. And so what they're trying to do is effectively moot out or make or render basically as moot the Supreme Court's opinion that is likely being handed down in Dobbs before it actually takes effect. Because they want Congress to put through this law that is totally unconstitutional before the opinion is handed down. Why didn't they wait until the Supreme Court rendered their opinion? They don't want to have what happened in Texas, what actually happened in Mississippi and some of these other states, where they don't want even 1 day of women having to carry their child and say, this is a child and sorry, you are past the time that you can have an abortion. They don't want even 1 day of saving the lives of innocent children. So that's the leak. And before we celebrate the merits of what is likely to be the ultimate opinion in the Dobbs case, the leak itself is so much more important right now and is the harm that is being caused to the institution of the Supreme Court, undermining the U.S. Constitution, and in fact is the actual insurrection that is going on here by the left to completely undermine all of our systems in government that are there with specific limited powers for a reason, which is to hold everyone accountable to the rule of law. And so before we celebrate the merits of the opinion, which I see a lot of people who are conservatives are saying, this is so great, Roe versus Wade is going to be gutted. Well, they're missing the bigger point here, which is the leak happened, and it happened so early on a first draft. And they're missing the whole point of how this could go off the rails and how the left always comes with their own ideas and their own narrative of how to try to get around and circumvent the rule of law and the Constitution when it suits them. So that's the much bigger issue at stake here. But let's also turn to the merits of this opinion. And so if, in fact, the court continues on with its process and procedures, and Justice Roberts is right that this is not going to affect the business of the court in any way, and this draft, there's always comments that come back on things. And of course, as he said in his statement, this doesn't reflect any particular justice's final vote. They still could be convinced otherwise by maybe public pressure or even a fellow justice. So that's why this is always behind closed doors, because until the opinion actually is handed down, anyone can change their mind. It's similar in some sense as why jury deliberations are private. Because imagine if that leaked and the public pressure campaign, because until the jury foreperson actually signs that verdict form, and until every member of the jury says, okay, this is my vote, and we're unanimous, and here it is, or, yes, we are hung irreconcilably, or however that final verdict happens, then any juror can change their mind. They are still deliberating and discussing. That is in context, that is a very similar thing that happens on the Supreme Court level. And so it's very important to the credibility and also the process of the court that the justices have the ability to speak among themselves freely and pass these drafts back and forth, and have the other associates give comments, the other concurrences, others write dissents. All of this is part and partial to their process. So it will be very interesting now, because we have this first draft, to see how much of it ultimately is changed, if at all, in the final opinion that will be handed down in another probably 6 weeks or 2 months. So Andy McCarthy, who of course is an attorney, and he comments quite a bit on air, and also writes pieces that I read, of course, in the National Review. I've been following him for a long time. He tweeted today, and his commentary was that his opinion is the Supreme Court should hand down their final opinion as soon as possible to mitigate the damage that this leak has caused. And I agree with that, not because it is a pressure on the Supreme Court or to try to undermine their ability for a full deliberation, but because that will minimize the opportunity for this lengthy time span between drafts and the final opinion for either Congress to act, or for this leaker and whoever else is behind this to have time to do their evil work before the Supreme Court actually hands out their full public opinion. So I think that's actually the best move, and hopefully Justice Roberts is encouraging that. And if they move up the timeline, and even as early as possibly in a few days or next week, say, this is the full and final draft, we're issuing this opinion, and that is jointly with a statement that says, leakers will not prevail. There's going to be an investigation, he already said in his statement today, about the source of that leak, and that's absolutely fair and proper, and I believe necessary. Then that will hopefully circumvent any of these types of leaks in the future. But we all know that Democrats play dirty. They cheat anywhere they can. They ignore the rules. They don't care. So whether or not this will ultimately be preventative, it remains to be seen. But I think that could substantially mitigate the damage that has come from this leak. So the merits, though, of this opinion draft, if something even substantially similar is ultimately the opinion that the court hands down, then this is a huge victory for the U.S. Constitution, not just for the position of pro-life, which of course reflects the science, it reflects truth, it reflects an unborn child's ultimately constitutionally protected right to life, and all of those things I discussed on my shows that I really encourage you to go back and listen to, or listen to for the first time. But this ultimately reflects as well an adherence to the U.S. Constitution over bad precedent. And one of the things in Alito's draft that now Justice Roberts has authenticated is that Alito says that Planned Parenthood versus Casey, when that was contemplating whether or not Roe versus Wade would either be upheld or severely undermined, what he said is that ultimately that court decided because of stare decisis, which is the legal principle that opinions generally on precedent should be followed as a general matter of course and as a general rule for predictability in the law. That principle to that court outweighed the higher and greater principle of always following the U.S. Constitution first and foremost. And so when there is an opinion that for whatever reason, either it was based on bad science at the time, where we didn't have as many, the sonogram technology and all of this, and the fetal heartbeat technology. Of course, we know from the truth of the Bible that life begins at conception, but we also have other tools and medical tools at our disposal now that we didn't have in 1973. And so even if we could make the argument that it was simply based on bad science, bad technology, shouldn't it be, and wouldn't the left, you'd hope, be the first ones to say, hey, follow the science? But of course, they're hypocrites, and they only follow the science when it benefits their political outcome and not when it actually benefits literally following the established science. But even if that were the only argument, then of course, Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey should be overturned, because that is not only against the science, but ultimately it's against the U.S. Constitution. And so whenever the Supreme Court, which as an entity is created by Article 3 in the Constitution, that entity and that agent of government is still under the supreme law of the land, the U.S. Constitution. Because but for the Constitution, you would not have a U.S. Supreme Court or any other inferior federal courts. And so the U.S. Supreme Court has to and is required by the Constitution to abide by the Constitution. So anytime that any precedent, no matter how long-standing, violates the U.S. Constitution in any way, that is a greater harm that needs to be rectified than the principle of stare decisis. There will always be competing interests, competing principles, and that's why in terms of the triage and ultimately understanding what does the rule of law require, and that's why conservatives want to conserve the rule of law. That's why that is so important. And so if you read through, and Politico released the entire draft, if you read through that, actually Justice Alito's rationale was very well written. It was very spot on. And as a first draft, it was absolutely excellent. And I think there is a lot to celebrate in that, regardless of your stance on pro-life, pro-choice, which of course we can debate those merits and we can debate why only one side is truthful. This isn't a political question. This is ultimately a question of following the U.S. Constitution and the rule of law. And so because this is the constitutionally correct, not just a politically correct opinion, that is something to celebrate. And I do hope that this leak will not have the effect of either allowing Congress to effectively moot it out before it's even handed down, and it also will not have the effect of getting any of the justices to be dissuaded from their allegiance and adherence and faithfulness to the U.S. Constitution when they are signing on to that majority opinion or even filing concurrences. So I hope it'll actually have the opposite effect. And if any of the liberal justices that sided against this actually were cared more about the Constitution than just about their own political interests, this would then be a 9-0 opinion. It should have been from the beginning. It shouldn't be a political question. It shouldn't be a political hot button. But if they were genuinely concerned about the U.S. Constitution and proper protocols and minimizing and deterring this kind of leaking from political pressure ever happening again against the U.S. Supreme Court, it should be a 9-0 opinion. And I hope that those leftist liberal judges will consider that. I'm sure that they won't, but if they really cared about the integrity of the court, first and foremost, they'd follow the Constitution. But even if it were to make sure that they stood in solidarity with the majority and said, this is not okay, and even if they wanted to say because of the leak, like I disagree with the majority's opinions, here would have been my deterrent, so they can still keep that in what we would call dicta, they could say, but I'm signing on to the majority so that this is 9-0, just to show that we stand in solidarity with the proper procedure and with the integrity of the court as an entity and a separate power in our federal government that is created and established by the U.S. Constitution. And if America means anything at all, we have to protect and preserve the integrity of the Constitution and our faithfulness to the rule of law. And this is also why we as conservatives need to continue to make sure that when we have wins, we make sure that they are principled, because a political win by any means is not a constitutionally sound win. So we're going to be talking a lot more about this, but that is the brief overview. And again, go back and listen to the other two podcasts if you want to know my thoughts on the merit of Roe versus Wade, give you some really good arguments in those couple of episodes. I'll push that out on my social media so that you have those links. But pray for the court. Also pray for Congress and for the senators like Joe Manchin, like Susan Collins, even Kristen Sinema, who had objected to the filibuster being removed and destroyed before. I mean, just pray for these people who are in office, that they wouldn't just see this as a political issue. They would see the attack on the integrity of the very fabric of our government and our country and why principles truly, truly matter. And in order to continue to keep this country so great, we can all have our opinions, we can have our political disagreements, we can have our arguments, but we all have to adhere first and foremost to our rule of law. So I'm Jenna Ellis, and I'll see you tomorrow. Legacy Precious Metals is the company that I trust to give you good and patient counsel for investing in your retirement. The Biden administration has caused a financial crisis, and they have no clue how to fix it. Oil prices have skyrocketed, and when oil prices go up, not only do your expenses go up, but the cost of transportation and shipping spikes, leading the prices of goods to rise. And we are already seeing record inflation. That's the last thing that we need. Our economy is in trouble, and you need to take steps to protect yourself. If all your money is tied up in stocks, bonds, and traditional markets, you may be vulnerable. So gold is one of the very best ways to protect your retirement. No matter what happens, you own your own gold. It's real, it's physical, and it's always been valuable since the dawn of time. Call Legacy Precious Metals today at 866-528-1903 or visit them online at legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com, where you can download the free investor's guide. You can also go to my Facebook page, Jenna Ellis. I am a public figure on Facebook, and I just posted yesterday a really great interview with the president of Legacy Precious Metals, who is discussing why you need to start your retirement account even if you're in your 20s or 30s. There is always a great time to protect your retirement and invest, just like you want to protect your health over the long term. So go to Legacy Precious Metals at legacypminvestments.com or call 866-528-1903. I also want to talk about another great American who is the sponsor of this podcast, and that, of course, is my good friend Mike Lindell. He has been canceled out of so many box stores for simply standing up for his own political opinion. And disagree or not, or support him or not, it is a fundamental right of every American to be able to voice their opinion, and that absolutely includes politics. That absolutely includes issues that are central to our culture. That includes faith. Mike is such a very sincere Christian, and I am proud to consider him a friend, and he is, of course, a friend of this show. So right now, there is a special on MyPillow.com. Click on the new radio listener specials. Get deep discounts on all MyPillow products, including a great towel set, which is a 6-piece set. It includes 2 bath, 2 hand towels, 2 washcloths, made in the USA, regularly $109.99, now just $39.99, but you have to use the promo code Jenna. That's Jenna. That tells Mike that you listen to this show, you're happy that he is a sponsor of this show, and you will get great, great discounts, but use the promo code Jenna, that's Jenna, either at mypillow.com or call 1-800-564-8475 and use the promo code Jenna.